Om Sadashiva
Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam.
Om Bhavatu Sahanam
Sahaviyamparavahai Tejasvinamastu ma vidvishavahai.
Om
Shanti Shanti Shanti. Vasudevendra Yogendram Natva Jnanapradam
Pradam
Gurum
Gurum
Mumukshunamritarthaya Tattva Bodho Vidhiyate.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Gurubhyo Namaha.
So, welcome back. We were on the topic of what is an Atma, what is not Atma, what I am not. Right. So we finished when the student asked what is Atma. The answer came: I'm not the three bodies. I'm not the physical. I'm not the Stula, Sukshma, or Karana Shariram. The three bodies we looked at, and he said, the Avasthatraya Sakshi, the one who's the witness of the three states of experience, the Turiam, and one which is beyond the five sheets, the Pancha Kosha. So we're going to look at Pancha Kosha now, the third set. And Pancha Kosha, the five sheets, is basically the same as your three bodies, just from a different point of view. So if you ask how many people are there, describe the people in this class right now, you could say there are X number of men and X number of women, Y number of women. Or you could say there are this many people between the ages of 20 to 40, this many people above the age of 40. So it's different classifications for the same set of people which is there, right? So Panchakosha is a different set of classification for the same three bodies. It addresses a different kind of confusion that we might have. So in when we were saying, when we associate with the physical body, for example, I might be saying, I'm a brown woman with black hair, or so on, or even the fact that I'm a woman. But we also say things like, I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, I'm feeling tired, referring to certain things. I might say things like, my digestion is not so good, or my circulation is not so good, things like that, referring to functions happening within the body. So we have these various kinds of confusion. So to take care of these, we are now going to look at the Panchakosha. Panchakosha, kosha meaning five sheets. Sheath means to cover. And we are going to look at the five functional layers, the layers of personality, which seems to cover this Atma. Of course, when we say cover the Atma, you have to think of it something like the clouds covering the sun. The sun is always there, but the clouds, just like we mistakenly think the clouds have covered the sun, this is another kind of covering in that way. So we will chant on your page 11. You can unmute yourself. Panchakosha ke
Panchakosha ke
Annamaya
Annamaya
Pranamayo Manomayo Vijnanamaya
Pranamayo
Manomaya
Manomyo
Vijnanamaya
Jnanamaya
Anandamayascheti.
Anandamaya
Anandamayasthiti.
Thank you. So the student asks, what is the 5 sheets? What is Pancha Kosha? And the answer comes Annamaya, which is the food sheath, Pranamaya, which is the pranic sheath, or you can also call it the energy sheath or the vital air sheath, Manomaya, the mental sheath. You can also think of it as the psychological layer or the emotional layer. Vijnanamaya, it's the intellectual sheath or the rational layer of the personality. And Anandamaya, the bliss sheath, the source of ananda, relaxation, revitalization. Cheti, so Chaiti, this is it. That's what it says. So each of these layers we will explore, of course, in a lot more detail, and each is much more subtle than the previous. Only the first Annamaya Kosha is visible, and others are more subtle and they could be perceived in more subtle ways. If you meet a friend, you might probably be able to tell if they are low or high energy that day, or what kind of emotions they might be experienced that day. You might be able to subtly tell. So how intelligent or rational a person is, that also you can perceive to an extent. So as part of wedding ceremonies, most of you, I think it's there, this ritual both in the north and the south. The Arundhati star is shown to the bride, right? So the bride, to show this very faint Arundhati star to the bride, the pujari will say, look at that tree, and then they will say, okay, now that tree, look at that right branch there. And then after the branch, they will say, okay, look at that bright star behind that branch. And then the faint star next to that bright star. So this is done for another reason. It's to remind the bride of Arundhati, who was Rishi Vashishta's wife, and apparently was the ideal wife, to remind the bride of the qualities of Arundhati is why it's done. But what I'm talking about is this Arundhati Naya, this method of pointing to the grosser. To the point of this whole exercise was not to make the bride look at the tree or the branch or even the bright star. It was to point to the faint star. So to get to that more subtle, we start with the grossest layer. So the grossest layer we have is this physical body, which is another name for the Annamaya Kosha, right? So Annamaya and your Sukshma Shariram, your subtle body. When we look at the functional divisions in these 5 sheets, it's being split into Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, and the Vijnanamaya Kosha. And finally, your Karana Shariram is, as the functional classification, is coming as Anandamaya Kosha. So we're just going to look at it from different standpoints now. So continuing on your page 11, Annamaya Kaha.
Annamaya Kaha
Annarasenaiva Bhutva.
Annarasenaiva bhutva
Annarasenaiva Vriddhim Prapya.
Annarasenaiva
Annarasenaiva Vruddhim
vruddhim
Prapya
prapya
Annan Rupa Prithivyaam.
Annarupa prithivyamadhu
Yadviliyate.
Yadviliyate
Tad Annamaya Koshaha.
Tadannamaya
Annamaya
Kosha
kosha
Stula Shariram.
Stula shariram
So here it says Annamaya Kosha is same as the Stula Shariram, the physical, the gross body. It is perceptible to the senses. It is tangible. It is solid. The Annamaya Kosha is a direct result of Annam, meaning food.
Ah.
Mute you all. So when we eat, our body discards what is not needed and keeps only what is needed. This is called rasa, the essence. The father and mother eat the food which gets converted into seed in the father in the form of sperm and egg or ovum in the mother. And these two are called annarasa, the essence of the annam. And the author says, Annarase naiva bhutva, comes into being only because of Annarasa, because the gross body has come into being by joining these two Annarasa, the sperm and the egg. Hence, you can think of Annarasa as the Shrishti Karanam of the body, the cause of creation of the physical body. Once the fetus is formed, the growth of the fetus happens again due to food, by the food eaten by the mother. So it says, Anna Rasenaiva Vriddhim Prapya. So it having gained growth, the physical body again grows because of the food. When the baby is born, that physical body again grows by the food eaten. The food or annam is converted into various minerals, proteins, carbs, etc. in your body. And these are again collectively called the annarasam. So the annam is also the sthiti karma, the preservation or sustenance cross of the body. The body continues to grow up till a particular point, then starts to decline. The food consumed, you would notice, by older people also decreases. And eventually the body dies and is burnt or buried, and basically it goes back to the earth, from where new food is again formed. Hence, the body becomes the source of food for future generations. This body comes from Annam and goes back to Annam. And you are what you eat, they say, which is very true. At least your physical body is what you eat, for sure. The author says, Anna Rupa Prithivyam Yat Viliyate. Viliyate means merges or resolves, Prithivyam, into the earth. So Anna Rupa, because it is the source of food. So this is talking about after the death of the physical body, how this again merges into the earth and becomes the source of food for future generations. So this annam, the food, is also the laya karana, also the resolution ground of the body, the physical body. And here when we say maya, so this is not the same as our popular maya. Mayam means product, and or it also can refer to the other suffix mayat, meaning saturated with. So if you say jalamaya, it could mean saturated with water. And that's why it's called annamaya. And why is it called kosha? That we explain, because it covers the atma. It seemingly covers the atma like a cloud seems to cover the sun. The Atman, who I am, is covered by this Annamaya Kosha. So when we see food out on the table, say an apple or a roti, we don't get confused that this food is us. But this physical body is again a product of the same food. But when it comes to this physical body, we say, I'm brown, I'm white, I weigh so much, and etc. So it's just a confusion because we are associating with one of these sheets, which is covering the Atma, and we are giving the attributes of the sheets to myself. Right. So, but if we think about it, this is something we've done all our lives. So it seems so natural to us to associate with the attributes of this physical body. But think about it. You had the body of a baby at some point, and then you had a body of a toddler and a teenager and a young adult and whatever body you have right now. And all this body was constantly changing. So how can I be this thing which is constantly changing? This body which is always changing cannot be me. And we saw before also that this body is a product of past janma karma, right? Past karma. It again, this body comes and it goes. Yet I remain. So how can I be this body? This thing made of food, Annamaya, cannot be me. So what am I then? There must be, let's look at the more subtle layers of what I could be. Continuing, Pranamaya Kaha.
Pranamaya Kaha.
Pranadayaha.
Pranadaya
Pancha Vyavaha.
Panchavayavaha.
Vagindriya Panchakam.
Vagandriya
Agindriya
Panchakam
Pranamaya Koshaha.
Pranamaya Kosha.
So let's look at something a bit more subtle that we also associate with. So this physical body is not me. Most of us will probably agree, right? But we associate so much with the mind, the manomaya. Well, right now we associate so much with this pranamaya also, the various functions of the body, the pranic functions of the body. So we say, when I tell you to take a deep breath in and take a deep breath out, you would say, okay, I'm taking a deep breath in and I'm exhaling loudly, right? So we associate with this breath that we take in, this prana. And so when you go to the toilet in the morning, you say, I'm going to the toilet, but it's again just another function happening. So the pranamaya kosha has the same, these 5 pranas that we talked about when we were looking at the Sukshma Shariram. The prana, the respiratory function, apana, the downward moving force or the evacuatory system, vyana, the circulation which happens throughout your body. I'm going through it very fast because we've covered it before, so you can refer to your notes. Samana, the digestive power, which converts the food into energy. We say, my digestion is weak today, or things like that, right? Udana, the reversing system or the emergency evacuation system. We say, my eyes are watering because some dust went to it, and so on. So these Pancha Prana, also known as Pancha Vayu, are responsible for the energy in our body. It's made available through the food we consume, and it's stored and used to do any action like I'm talking right now or walking. It's expressed in the form of Kriya Shakti, the power of doing through the Pancha Karmendriya. So the Karmendriya being the organs of action. So even the Pancha Karmendriya also comes under the Pranamaya Kosha. So Vak Adi Indriya Panchakam, it says. Vak Adi meaning speech, etc. So we have to think of Vak, Pani, Pado, Payu, Upastaha. So it's the power of speech, the power of locomotion, the power of grasping, the power of evacuation, and the power of the organ of reproduction it's talking about. So all the organs, indriyams that we interact with the world, all the responsible for the Kriya Shakti. So out of the 17 components of the Sukshma Sharira, 10 parts are now representing the Kriya Shakti are being classified as Pranamaya Kosha. So the Annamaya Kosha was referring to the anatomical aspects, and the physiological aspects are being covered in the Pranamaya Kosha now. In the dead body, the Sthula Shariram continues, the physical body continues, but there is no prana, right? So we saw before that the subtle body travels after the death. So the Pranamaya Kosha, which belongs to the subtle body, is no longer available after the death of the physical body. So on concluding previously that I'm not the physical body, one might wonder, what about the life force which pervades this body? That life force which seems to travel beyond this body even after death, right? In our culture, we talk about this traveling that happens. Am I that then? Am I that which survives this physical body? Am I that which makes this body alive, the prana? But that again is very easy to see that if you observe your breath, for example, it is always changing. But we rationalized before that I am not changing. I can observe my breath. The prana is something to be known. We concluded before that I'm the knower and I am the witness. I'm not something to be known. I'm the knower myself. And when we look at it, all these different pranas are also basically just objects, but more subtle than physical objects, but still they're just objects. So let's look at something even more sukshma, even more subtle, and even more pervasive, which addresses more confusions that we might have. So continuing, manomaya kaham.
Manomaya kaha.
Manascha
Manascha.
Gyanendriya Panchakam
Jnanendriyam
Jnanendriyapanchakam
Panchakam.
Militva
militva
Militva.
Yo Bhavati
Yo
bhavati
bhavati.
Sah Manomaya Koshah.
Sa manomaya
manomaya koshaha.
kosha.
So what is the Manomaya Kosha? Now the student is asking. And this is the emotional sheath or the physiological sheath. So that is something we associate with so strongly, right? So we associate so much with this emotions. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling happy. The author says the main part is the mind. The Manomaya represents the Ichcha Shakti, the power of desire. Mind is the seat of all emotions and hence desires. The desires are generated in the mind, Ichcha meaning desire. The desires are generated in the mind, meaning the Manomaya Kosha, and the Pranamaya Kosha, which we looked at before, its job is to fulfill those desires. Author says, Manah Gyanendriya Panchakam Militva. Militva meaning combining. By combining the mind with the 5 Gyanendriyas, the 5 organs of knowledge, Yo Bhavati Sah Manomaya Kosha. That which is born out of this combination, that is the Manomaya Kosha. So we can only desire what we know, right? We can't desire something we don't know at all. So Ichcha Shakti requires the support of the Gyanendriyams, your eyes, nose, tongue, skin, so on. And yes, so of course, marketers know this very well, which is why if you're sitting in the movie theater in the break, you might smell some popcorn because they actually come spray this smell of popcorn. So that your senses now smell this popcorn, and now you know there is popcorn available, and then you desire it. The mind, which is made of thoughts, emotions, desire, our personality, that most people think this is what I am. We identify with this personality, which is funny because the word personality comes from this Greek word persona. And this Greek word persona meant masks. So it comes from this time where in the olden days, in the plays, the actors were on stage, so they didn't have, of course, these tiny microphones we have today. So for their voice to travel across the audience, they would hold these giant masks, which had a microphone hidden in them. And that's where the word comes from. So it literally, the personality comes from this word which was used for mask. So this is just a mask, a sheath. The mind is this sheath too, which is covering the Atma. So I'm not this mind. And the same arguments we said before apply here too. The mind is also constantly changing. They say we have something like 16,000 thoughts in a day. Most of them repetitive and useless. So this constantly changing mind, this cannot be me. This, because I am unchanging. Right, so we finish with this, the 3 koshas out of the 5. Any questions? Are you getting where we are going with all this? Are you getting the argument of how I cannot be this changing thing? How all these are just sheets, covers, which are really covering the real me. So on page 12, Vijnanamaya kaha.
Vijnanamaya kaha.
Buddhir Panchakam.
Buddhi Jnanendriya Panchakam
Militva
Militva
Yo Bhavati
Yo Bhavati
Savijnanamaya Kosha.
Savijnanamaya Kosha.
So what is Vijnanamaya Kosha? The intellectual, rational, or knowledge sheath. The author tells us that this represents the Jnana Shakti, the power of knowing, right? So whatever desire we know, in order to desire anything, we must know it. But thankfully, everything we know, we don't necessarily desire, thanks to the Lord. So in addition to the mind, manaha, we also have buddhi, the intellect. That's the discriminative power which keeps us from desiring everything or chasing everything which comes our way. So if we see an ad for a Domino's pizza or McDonald's, hopefully by now we know such food is not good for us, and the intellect will come in and we will not desire it. We will remember how much we will have to work to burn those calories off, or how much damage this food might do to my body. So we hopefully won't desire it, at least hopefully not all the time, because the intellect will come in there. So the Vijnanamaya Kosha also shares the Jnanendriyams with the Manomaya Kosha. So Buddhir Jnanendriya Panchakam Militva Yo Bhavati. So combining Militva, the intellect faculty, with the Jnanendriyas, the 5 organs of knowing, that is the Vijnanamaya Kosha. So Manomaya Kosha was the mind combined with the 5 Jnanendriyas. And Vijnanamaya is the intellect combined with the same Jnanendriyas. So the deciding power, the discriminatory power of the intellect is thankfully exercised, and the desires which got generated in the mind, they get refined. The discriminating power of the intellect weighs the pros and cons and helps us decide if a particular desire, chasing a particular desire, will serve us or not. Of course, when the discriminating power is not very strong, we give in to these desires, which we know are not so good for us anyway. So, of course, the ultimate refinement of this discriminating power is called viveka. So, which is beyond discriminating of the worldly things, right? So, the viveka, as we saw, was nitya viveka, discrimination between what is nityam, permanent, and what is anityam, what is impermanent, and what will not give me the permanent, lasting happiness that I'm seeking. So after dismissing the mind, in which all these desires are generated, we come to something even more subtle, the intellect, which probably most of us are very attached to, right? We all associate with how intelligent we think we are, how discriminating we think we are. So even when you're trying to understand this class right now, what are you using? You're using your intellect. So is that me, maybe? Am I this intellect with which I try to understand everything? But the same logic applies. Am I aware of my intellect? I am. I'm able to observe my intellect. I'm aware if I understand what the teacher is saying in class right now, or if I'm completely confused. I'm able to observe this. If I'm aware of this intellect, then it is also an object, and I am the subject. I cannot be what I am aware of. And we know that the intellect is also constantly changing. There are so many things we didn't know before that we know now. There are so many things that have come to learn and understand with age and experience. And there are so many things I learned in school that I've now forgotten, like chemistry and algebra. So all the same negations apply. Well, this intellect appears sentient. It is not. It is borrowing the sentiency from you. So in this, what they call the hard problem of consciousness, right? So it's not, well, the answer is given in the scriptures. Everyone is fascinated by what is this thing called consciousness? What is this thing which makes sentiency? So there is some schools of thought which propose that the mind generates sentiency, right? So they say it's a conscious observer who makes a thing which lends consciousness. So to kind of ridicule or explain how ridiculous this theory was, this was actually a theory in physics, right? So we had classical physics, which had certain theories. Now quantum physics has more theories about what is consciousness. So there was this German physicist, probably you've heard of the name, Schrödinger, who came up with this thought experiment to negate this theory of a conscious observer is what creates sentiency. So the thought experiment was, there's a radioactive box, and you put a cat, thankfully it was a thought experiment, you put a cat in the radioactive box. If the radioactive material goes off, then the cat dies. And if the radioactive material doesn't go off, then the cat lives. Right? So if you say a conscious observer is required for everything, and you think of this thought experiment, then, but you close this box and no one's observing this scenario anymore. So through the math that was there at the time, because of that theory, you would have to assume that the cat is both alive and dead at the same time, because there was a certain probability that the radioactive material would go off, a certain probability that it wouldn't go off. So if you were to accept this theory of a conscious observer being required, it meant the cat would be both alive and dead at the same time, which is obviously ridiculous. The cat can only be, once you open the box, you will know if the cat is alive or dead. It cannot be both. So that was to ridicule this theory of a conscious observer is what's required, that consciousness originates from the mind. So the mind, the intellect can appear sentient, but it is not. It is only borrowing the sentiency from you. And of course, the problem with all these things that we look at in science, there are so many brilliant physicists who've been trying to figure out this hard problem of consciousness for eons. And unfortunately, they will never get the answer, because what does science work with? It works with the observable. But there is this something interesting I heard recently. We talk about the dogma of religion or spirituality, dogma being preconceived notion, right? The preconceived notion of something is called a dogma. But in Vedanta, yes, we're asking, it's a requirement that you have Shraddha, you have faith in the scriptures for this knowledge to make sense to you, but it doesn't have to be blind faith. Your intellect has to be satisfied. So it's not a dogma. If we actually think about it, what about the dogma of science? Isn't science going by the preconceived notion that about the physicality of the world? It's saying everything that exists can be observable, can be measured, right? So if you're trying to look at the creation of the universe and you're only looking at what can be perceived, isn't that another kind of dogma? It's the same kind of dogma as relying on your sense perceptions. But we know that even our sense perceptions are deceptive. So we might be seeing different colors right now in the world. Like, so you might be seeing this red I'm wearing or the blue of the sky, but they're all basically just waves passing through the prism, which give the perception of different colors. So that's the problem with thinking something observable, which is acting with sentiency, is sentient. So scriptures is telling you that this something, just because it looks sentient, is not sentient. This mind is Jada, is inert. This intellect is also inert. They're only borrowing the sentiency. So when I was in deep sleep, the mind and intellect were resolved, right? So am I that then? So hence we come to the sheath of bliss. So continuing, Anandamaya kaham
Anandamaya Kaha
evameva
Evameva
Karana Sharira Bhuta
Karana Sharira Bhuta
Vidyastam Malinastvam
Vidyasthalinastam
Priyadi Vritti Sahitam
Priyadivritti Sahitam
Sat Anandamaya Kosha
Sat Anandamaya Kosha
Etat Kosha Panchakam.
Etat Kosha Panchakam.
Thank you. So before we dive into that, is there any questions about the Vijnanamaya Kosha that we just covered? Any, because that is a big confusion, right? So the sentiency being associated with the mind and the intellect is a big confusion that exists. So there's also even all this debate of there is the whole genre of these shows and movies now which talk about AI, artificial intelligence, and whether AI can be sentient or not, whether they can have consciousness or not. Personally, I quite enjoy those, but knowing them to be fiction, but it's there, right? So it's so if any questions, please let me know. Of course, the answer is yes, AI cannot be sentient. And if we have any confusion about that, you can ask the makers of the AI. They will tell you that they're not trying to create conscious beings because they don't know how to. They don't understand what is consciousness to be able to try to replicate it. And of course, everything they're programming is something that they know. And consciousness is not something they know, and definitely not something they know how to generate. So when we dig further, we come to the sheath of bliss. We said in deep sleep, this mind and intellect are all resolved, right? But I am still there. So am I this nothingness, as the Buddhists say? Am I this emptiness then? Because this emptiness is there when everything else is resolved. So evameva, in the same manner, karana sharira bhutva avidyasta malina sattva, that which is abiding in avidya, that is abiding in ignorance, this nothingness, in the form of causal body of impure sattva. So we looked at the three gunas, and the difference in deep sleep and samadhi state is in samadhi, sattva guna is predominantly at play. And in deep sleep, tamogum guna, tamas, is predominantly at play. And we saw that tamas obscures consciousness. It has the capacity to act as a cover for consciousness, right? So that's why it's called impure the author is here saying of impure sattva, meaning referring to tamas. So Anandamaya Kosha is the same as the Karana Shariram that we explored in detail before. So we spoke of how the Karana Shariram is the seed form, is of the physical and the subtle body of the Stula and Sukshma Shariram. And at the time of Pralayam, at the time of cosmic destruction of the universe, the bodies go back to this seed form. So Karana Shariram is also given the name of avidya, ignorance, because in this state, I do not know anything. It is another technical word for it is also mula vidya, the root ignorance. And the author uses the term avidyasta, which refers to the same thing. So we all have a individual level prahalayam, which happens every day when we go to sleep. In sleep, the objective world of shared experiences is not resolved, of course. So these trees and buildings will still be there when you wake up, but it is as good as resolved for us because there is no association with the physical body or even the subtle body. So we said if some insect bites you in your sleep, you won't know. You might just wake up and see these bite marks on yourself, because both the association with the physical and the subtle bodies drop that point. You're completely ignorant of what's happening. So the objective world, while it's there, it's kind of as good as resolved. You have in your deep sleep, there is no mind, no likes and dislikes, no ahamkara, no this ego, no this sense of I-ness. There is no individuality. One Swamiji gives the story of a man in the olden days in India who, when untouchability was still very prevalent, he enters this train, he sees an untouchable, and he says, "Oh, don't cross my path," and he goes and sits away from this man. And then as the journey progresses, he falls asleep and falls into the lap of this untouchable while he's sleeping. And so he wakes up to find himself in the lap of this man he thought was an untouchable. So in your deep sleep, everything is resolved. Your likes and dislikes have no play there. We are dead to the world in a way. So when we are in this karana shariram, in deep sleep state, we have only twofold experience, which we talked about before. One, the experience of total ignorance. I'm not aware of anything. I'm completely unaware. In fact, I'm not even aware I'm sleeping, because sleep, if you look at it, doesn't really have a present tense, right? I cannot say I'm sleeping right now. You could say I'm sleepy, but not that I'm sleeping right now. You can't claim it. You can say he sleeps, but never I sleep. So in sleep or karana shariram, there is just this complete ignorance about everything. And the second experience which exists in that state is ananda, the state of no stress. So this second aspect of happiness is indicated in the verse by Priya Adi Vritti Sahitam, which is associated with the different states of happiness. Priya Adi means the different gradation of happiness. Did we talk about Priya, Moda, and Pramoda before? Can someone
We haven't,
see
I
what
think.
that is, if you remember?
We haven't discussed it before,
So
Spandani.
these are the
And Pramoda.
Okay, maybe we didn't discuss in Tattva Bodha 22. Shubhadaji, you want to tell us what it is?
Yeah, I mean, these are three stages of Ananda, we can call it. The first is called Priya, when you see an object and you like it, and that gives you a sense of excitement or happiness. And the second is Moda, when you happen to get it in your hand. You have not yet experienced it, but there is a second stage which you call as Moda. And the third one is when you actually experience it. And then you can take any object, or you can even say, give example of a chocolate or a ice cream or something. So you see it in the shop and you get excited. Okay, let me go get it. Then you take it, you buy it, it's in your hand. And so there's a sense of happiness that I've got the thing I wanted. And the third one is when you actually eat it and then you really experience and get the pleasure out of the taste finally of that thing.
Lovely, very nicely explained. Is that clear? So Priya, Moda, and Pramoda are the gradations of happiness that we can experience. So this happiness we can experience from external things of the world have a gradation. So there is a certain happiness when you see an object you desire. When you actually possess this, you go into the shop and you buy this object that you desire, there is a higher level of happiness. And then when you actually experience that object, maybe you eat this chocolate or you wear the clothes that you buy, there is even a higher level of happiness when you're like one with this chocolate. But what happens after that, right? So do you stay in this very blissful state of that you had when you took that first bite of that wonderful chocolate? No, unfortunately, that happiness slowly subsides. Maybe the memory of the chocolate will, if it was a really good chocolate, will still give you some happiness later. But eventually the effect is over. So that's the limitation with Vishaya Ananda that you can experience because of objects of the world, objects or people or things of the world are subject to gradation, are also subject to the three doshas that we talked about, which is you have like Dukkha Mishri Tattvam, all this happiness is mixed with pain, Atripti Karatvam, it will never completely satisfy you, and Bandhakatvam, they will also bind you eventually. They will cause an attachment which will bind you and cause you suffering later. So when we talk about Ananda, we don't talk about this when we say our nature is Satchit Ananda, I am the nature of bliss itself, we are not talking about this Ananda which is subject to Priya, the gradations. This Ananda that I am is beyond that. But when we are talking about Anandamaya Kosha, we are talking about like a reflection of this Ananda alone. So it's purely a reflection where, because this is again a sheath, right? But because there is no differences, there is non-duality in this state, you still get a very beautiful reflection of this Ananda. But of course there is, it's also covered with ignorance, so you don't really recall the experience of the Ananda. Of course, you can say, we can wake up and say, I slept very well. So I had a very peaceful sleep. But this is also not the ultimate Ananda that I am. It's just a mere reflection. The author says, Etat Pancha Koshakam. So these are the 5 sheets. So it's like the Russian dolls. We kept going deeper and deeper, removing doll after doll to see, is the Atma, me, something even more subtle? Will I go, if I go deeper into these observable things, will I find the Atma? But what is left? At first, it appears like there is nothing. So does it mean there is really emptiness? There is no self, like the Buddhists say. We looked very carefully. There appears to be nothing more than these 5 sheets, right? So we covered pretty much all our objective and subjective experiences when we talk about I am, and then we add something else. So Shastra is telling you that anything you really add after I am is all mithya. It's only the I am which is the Satyam, that I am, I exist, that is the only Satyam. Did I not observe all these 5 sheets? Did I not experience all these 5 sheets, even the blankness of Anandamaya. I experienced it. So one cannot say, I do not exist. If we say that, who is saying that? There has to be someone there to say, I don't exist, right? So the statement itself doesn't make any sense. The problem is that we are looking for an object. It is not the object of seeking, it is the subject. It is the one who is seeking. So we do not do the same mistake of science that we think it is something that I will ever observe, that I will ever experience. If you're ever looking for an experience of Atma or Brahman, you're completely missing the point. It is at most, so the next bit that we will talk about when we talk about the creation of the universe, how this objective universe came to be, we will realize that every experience that I'm having is an experience of Brahman. Every experience is Brahman itself. So if some of you logged in a bit early to this class, I was playing Nirvana Shatakam. It's a beautiful prose written by Adi Shankaracharya, and I was playing the audio of Swami Paramarthananda chanting it. So this beautiful verse, prose, talks about all the negations we just covered in these 3 things. So it says how Mano Buddhi Ahankara Chittanina, I'm not this mind, I'm not this intellect, I'm not these memories. None of these is me. Aham bhojanam naiva bhojanna bhokta. I'm not the experiencer. I'm not the object of the experience, and I'm not the process of experiencing itself. I'm not any of this Tripurti. I am not, and then it goes on to say, yeah, I will send you the link. You can look at it. It's a beautiful verse at this point. Contemplate on when you're later in your journey to meditate on it. So it covers all these negations that we talked about. So everything after I am is mithya. So we just have to understand the I am, and you're at the truth. So the paradox that I said once before, but we cannot say it enough, is without the seeking, it'll never be known. So this process of seeking that you are doing right now is very important. But at some point, you need to stop the seeking, because the seeker will never find it. You have to drop being the seeker and just know. That's when you'll come to it. So any questions we can take. So that brings us to talking about anatma, but I'm not.
So I do have a question actually.
Yes.
Since you said Mano Buddhi Ahankara Chittani Naham, so that reminded me that Tattva Bodha has, in the subtle body, it has 17 parts. So the Antakarna has only Mana and Buddhi. It doesn't talk about Chitta and Ahankara.
Mm-hmm.
So as you extrapolate these instruments into the sheets, the Stula Shariram is, of course, we know, it is the Annamaya Kosha, and Karan Sharira is Anandamaya Kosha. The middle 3 koshas actually belong to the subtle body, right? So the Vijnanamaya Kosha has Buddhi, and a Manomaya Kosha has Mana.
Right. So when we
So
looked
where
at
does the Chitta and Ahankar, where do they fall?
right. So in Tattva Bodha text, when we did that part, we were only talking about the 17 components of Sukshma Shariram. Right. So we This sometimes some texts talk about 19 components where they put ahamkara and
Buddhi.
chitta as a separate component. But in this text, it's kind of clubbing it together. It's not explicitly mentioned. So you can still understand it as a concept, but so when you talk about chitta, memory, when you're recalling memory of a fact, right? So this,
So which kosha can we associate it with?
right, it
Like
still comes
Ahankar and
under,
which one will go to Manomaya, which one will go to Vijnanamaya,
you
or
won't be able to classify it so strictly because like we know chitta from when you're thinking of a fact, it'll come as part of the mind. Sorry, when you're thinking of a fact, it'll come as part of the intellect. And when you're thinking of an emotion, something which generates an emotion, it'll come as part of the mind. So
so the
depending on
Ahankar
that,
is with the Manomaya?
it can, yeah, it can be shared, like just like your Gyanendriyas are shared between Manomaya and Vijnanamaya, right? So these are just classifications to kind of understand. We're talking about the whole, in the whole, we're talking about the same thing.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Spandana ji, can I ask
Yes.
this question not related to this?
Sure, please go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to know what are the, can you suggest any beginner meditation practices or something like that for beginners, basically?
Yeah, there are several. Yeah, it's very important, definitely, I would say, to have a meditation practice. I've taken meditation classes in the past,
Okay.
but
Could you share the link?
yeah, but I wouldn't want you to do it that way, really. Meditation, I really believe you should get, you can start just doing any kind of meditation. But it's ideal to get instruction from a teacher and get initiated. Maybe you can reach out to me and tell me what is a practice we can have a little discussion on what is a practice you currently do, and maybe I can suggest something specifically for you.
Okay.
If there's many more of you interested, I could consider doing that
Yes, please.
meditation class again also. So if more of you are
Yes, please,
interested,
my
you can let me know.
Okay. Okay, I'll message you then.
Yeah, you can message me, and if more people are interested, you can indicate your interest on the group. If there is sufficient requests, maybe I will do that class again. If there's just one or two of you, we can have an individual session and cover it also.
Okay. Thank you, Spandana ji.
But having said that, if I'm guessing a lot of you have particular meditation practices already. There are apps these days called Headspace and things like that, which I don't honestly recommend because the most important thing about meditation is to have a consistent practice. Of course, right now I'm talking about meditation as more of a concentration or sort of exercise to as an exercise to clear the mind for Chitta Shuddhi. We talk about Vedantic meditation, which is different. So that comes after your Shravanam, Mananam phase. You know, once you have doubtless knowledge, you then start doing Nididhyasana meditation on the Vedantic teaching. But for that, you need to first have received enough of this Vedantic teaching. So we talk about it when we do chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita. Right, so I'm not talking about Nididhyasana, I'm talking about this kind of upasana, this practice to generate Chitta Shuddhi. So for that, you could do mantra-based meditation, mindfulness. There are some people who do dynamic meditations. Depending on your tendencies, preferences right now, one might work better than the other for you. From the Vedantic tradition, the most simple one for someone to get start with would be the mantra-based meditation, which is what, if people who are interested, I would give some instruction on. So all that to say, the most important thing about any practice you choose is consistency. Make sure that you have you're doing the same practice morning and evening every day, and you're not dependent on something external like a guided meditation to really do that. Most people think meditation is much more complicated than it is. It's really the simplest thing. You're just being asked to go inwards, right? So but we can talk more about it. Any more questions?
I have a small query, Spandaji. So on completion of this Tattva Bodha, we start with the Bhagavad Gita, right?
Yes. They might not, to be honest, there might not be a new batch right when you finish Tattva Bodha. So I would highly recommend you start, if you're interested, you can join an existing Bhagavad Gita batch if you want to go, and probably in another maybe 6 months after you finish, there might be a new Bhagavad Gita batch, which I might be taking. But we will announce the dates and all that a bit later. So there is a batch which Swamini Tanmay is currently taking for a year. So they're already past chapter 2, but she's taken some revision verses. And so it's a good way to look at those revision verses and go on. So now that you're halfway through Tattva Bodha, some of those things might make sense to you. You might still be a bit lost at some points, but if you have a desire to start with Bhagavad Gita, you're very welcome to join that batch. You can ping me and I'll add you to the group. Else, there will be a Bhagavad Gita batch for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. So there's any more questions, or we can end, right? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnasya
Purnamādāya Purnamevāvashishyate.
Om
Om
Shanti
Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Om Tat Sat.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Spandana.
Thank you.
Thank you, Spandana ji.
Dhanyavad.
Thank you, Spandaji.